The city chewed me up and spat me out. Jobless. Evicted. Alone. My life, once a neat grid of spreadsheets and coffee dates, had become a single stark line. Despair. That's when the call came. Aunt Lorna. Her voice, a rusty hinge, offered an escape. "The farm," she rasped. "It's yours if you want it. Missouri. Backwoods. Isolation." It sounded like a shroud, a place to disappear. But disappearance was all I had left. My aunt's words echoed in my ears, less an invitation, more a warning. Quiet out there, good for starting over. What she didn't say hung heavier. The farmhouse waited at the end of a gravel path, swallowed by trees. Oaks, ancient and gnarled, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching for the sagging roof. The air hung heavy, thick with the smell of damp earth and forgotten things. Inside, shadows clung to the corners. Dust motes danced in the pale light filtering through grimy windows. The silence was absolute, broken only by the creak of the floorboards beneath my feet. Each night, the woods came alive. Cicadas buzzed, an incessant chorus. The wind whistling through the cracked panes sounded like whispers, like secrets shared in the dark. Peaceful, I told myself, my voice a thin thread in the oppressive quiet. But the house felt like a held breath, like something was waiting, watching. Days bled into one another, a tapestry woven from dust and echoes. I ripped up rotten floorboards, each creak a groan of protest from the house, scrubbed years of grime from the bathroom tiles, repaired the leaky roof, the hammering of nails a futile attempt to quiet the whispers of the wind. The house resisted my efforts. Each night the wind seemed to undo a day's work, or maybe it was something else. Something in the way the shadows lengthened as dusk fell. Evenings, I'd build a fire in the old hearth. The scent of wood smoke did little to mask the musty odor. It was the smell of time, of things long past. As I ate my meager dinner, the silence pressed in. The tick of the old grandfather clock on the landing was a hammer blow against the quiet. Each night I told myself it was just the house settling, but a shiver would run down my spine, a primal fear that had nothing to do with the cold. The 8th night. The silence shattered. I stood at the stove, the comforting hiss of the kettle a counterpoint to the oppressive stillness of the house. Then, from the darkness beyond the kitchen window, a sound. A cough. Low, guttural, wet. Not an animal. Human. The kettle shrieked, the sound jarring in the sudden silence that followed. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I strained to hear, every sense on high alert. Silence. Then a rustling in the trees beyond the yard, as if something were moving through the undergrowth. Terror, cold and sharp, pierced through me. I fumbled for the porch light, the sudden glare of the bulb a beacon in the darkness. The yard lay empty, bathed in the cold light of the moon. No footprints, no broken branches, just the wind rustling the leaves, mocking my fear. Sleep that night was impossible. Every creak of the house, every sigh of the wind sent my pulse racing. Dawn painted the sky a pale, bruised purple, but brought little comfort. The memory of the cough, the certainty that I hadn't imagined it, clung to me like cobwebs. When Deputy Rollins arrived, her cruiser kicking up dust in its wake, I almost wept with relief. She listened patiently, her face etched with years of rural skepticism, as I recounted the events of the previous night. Her silence was more damning than any words. "My aunt," I blurted out, desperate for her to understand. "She mentioned something similar, years ago." The deputy's eyes narrowed, a flicker of something like unease crossing her features. "Winter of '09, she said, her voice flat, devoid of inflection. "Same story, coughing, whispering. We searched the property, found nothing." She paused, her gaze fixed on the tree line, her jaw clenched tight. "She moved out that spring," she added, the words barely a whisper. "Said she couldn't take it anymore." Deputy Rollins's words echoed in the empty house, each syllable a hammer blow against the fragile barrier of disbelief I'd been clinging to. Aunt Lorna mentioned restless nights, strange noises, a feeling. I dismissed them as ramblings of an aging woman. Now, dread tightened in my stomach. I raced to the spare room. The floorboards groaned underfoot as I crossed the room. Under the bed, a dusty shoebox. Inside, a stack of letters bound with faded twine. Aunt Lorna's handwriting, elegant looping cursive. I sat on the edge of the bed and began to read. Each letter was a testament to my aunt's unraveling. She wrote of sleepless nights, scratching sounds, a face at the window. The face, pale, gaunt, with eyes like black marbles, grinning. Aunt Lorna described it with chilling clarity, a face that haunted nightmares. The letters detailed her growing terror. One passage sent a wave of ice through my veins. The coughing started last week, it's always there just beyond the light, watching, he wants me gone. The word hung in the air, who was he, what did he want? His whispers echoing through the years, I devoured the letters. The last entry was short, he's getting bolder. I hear him in the walls now, scratching, whispering, let him have it. The letters fluttered to the floor, landing like fallen leaves on the dusty floorboards. Fear, cold and clammy, gripped me in its icy embrace. I wasn't alone in this house. Aunt Lorna's terror, her desperation, seeped from the very walls, a palpable presence that sent a shiver down my spine. I spent the next few days in a frenzy of activity. I boarded up the basement windows, reinforcing the flimsy wood with heavy planks, bought deadbolts and industrial-strength locks for every door and window. The house, once a refuge, had become a prison. But I clung to the illusion of security the fortifications provided. But the coughing continued, closer now, more insistent. And then came the scratching. Faint at first, like the scrabble of a small animal against the siding, but it grew bolder, more persistent, until it seemed to emanate from every wall, every corner of the house. One evening, as I dragged trash to the burn pile, a flicker of movement at the edge of the trees caught my eye. I froze, my heart pounding against my ribs. The woods were silent, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and approaching rain, and then I saw them. Handprints. Small handprints, child-sized. Pressed into the damp earth, they formed a chilling trail. They led from the tree line, across the overgrown lawn, and stopped just before the back porch steps. The air, thick with the scent of rain and something metallic, seemed to crackle around me. These weren't the prints of an animal. These weren't the marks of wind or weather. These were the remnants of something else, something small, something wrong. Fear, cold and sharp, cut through my gut. I glanced back at the house, its windows dark and vacant. It wasn't just a presence, it was something tangible, something that left its mark. I called Deputy Rollins, my voice trembling. She arrived just as dusk painted the sky in hues of violet and orange. Her usually stoic face paled as she followed the trail of handprints. Mud, she said, her voice thin. Rain's been heavy, probably just kids messing around. But her eyes, wide and wary, darted to the tree line. She didn't believe her own words, and neither did I. That night, the darkness felt heavier, more oppressive. The wind, usually a low whisper through the trees, howled like a banshee, rattling the windows, testing the flimsy barriers I had erected. The power flickered, the lone bulb casting grotesque shadows that danced across the walls, then plunged the house into an absolute suffocating darkness. I huddled on the couch, a hunting knife clutched in my sweaty hand, my breath catching in my throat. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the wind, sounded amplified, distorted in the darkness. Then from above a new sound, a slow, dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across the roof, back and forth, back and forth. A thud, heavy and final, echoed from the back of the house, followed by the unmistakable clatter of something hitting the ground. My blood turned to ice. Something was outside, something that had been on the roof, something that had just gotten inside. The doorknob rattled, a slow, deliberate movement, then a voice, raspy and wet, as if the speaker's throat were filled with mud, slithered through the darkness. "Open up," it rasped, the sound a chilling blend of pleading and threat. "I'm cold." Panic seized me, my fingers fumbled for my phone but the screen remained dark. The voice came again, closer now. "Let me in," it hissed. This place was a tomb, a vessel for something dark. The back window exploded inward. I scrambled back. A shadow oozed through the shattered window. I ran, out the front door, into the night. They found the house empty. A single child-sized handprint marred the refrigerator. I left the keys in the mailbox, never looked back. The city lights, once a beacon of hope, now felt like a cage. A flimsy barrier against the darkness I had carried with me from that house, nestled deep in the Missouri woods. My cramped studio apartment, once a symbol of my failure, became my sanctuary. A place where I could lock the doors, draw the blinds, and pretend the shadows couldn't reach me. But the silence was never truly silent. The city, for all its noise and chaos, couldn't drown out the whispers that followed me. The cough, low and guttural, echoing from the depths of a nightmare. The scratching at my door, insistent, demanding. The feeling of being watched, of eyes boring into my back, followed me like a curse. Deputy Rollins called, her voice tight with a concern she couldn't quite mask. "Nothing but a broken window," she said, her words clipped, professional. No sign of forced entry, no footprints, no explanation for the handprint. I could hear the unspoken question in her voice. The doubt, the fear, but I had no answers, only the chilling certainty that whatever had haunted that house hadn't stayed there. Sleep, once an escape, became a torment. The darkness pulsed with unseen eyes, unseen movements. The shadows stretched and twisted, taking on familiar, terrifying shapes. The little handprints, smeared and sinister, appeared on my walls, on my furniture, on the ceiling above my bed. I tried to tell myself it was stress, exhaustion, the lingering trauma of a terrifying experience, but deep down, I knew the truth. Aunt Lorna's words echoed in the silence of my city prison. Some things stick to the walls, some things follow you home. Now, every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the pipes, sends a shiver down my spine. Every flicker of the lights reveals a fleeting glimpse of movement in the corner of my eye, and sometimes in the dead of night when the city sleeps and the shadows hold their breath, I hear it, a whisper, faint but unmistakable. "I'm here," it rasps, the voice a chilling blend of childlike innocence and ancient evil. "I'm home," and in the darkness something grins.